Welcome to the final webinar in OSBA's Get On Board series. This is the last of a three-part series designed to provide general information about the legal aspects of running for school board member. The webinars included in this series are First Steps, Contributions and Expenditures, and this webinar on reporting requirements. These webinars are general guidance, and OSBA's legal division is also available to assist you as you move forward with your campaign. For legal guidance on specific questions that apply to your own campaign, please contact the Secretary of State's office, your County Board of Elections, or your private legal counsel. First question we always get is who's required to file a campaign finance report. Any candidate that has a campaign committee, regardless of the amount they spend or receive, may be required to file. The individuals who are usually not required to file are filing fee only candidates, who are individuals whose only expenditure is the filing fee to become a candidate, which they pay using their own funds. That person doesn't have to file campaign finance reports, also doesn't have to designate a treasurer or create a campaign committee. Local candidate waiver filers don't have to file campaign finance reports, although they may have to file a report terminating their campaign, or actually they will. And of course, in order to not have to file, they have to comply with the local candidate waiver. More information about local candidate waivers is available in the First Steps webinar. What does a campaign finance report have to include? First of all, it has to have general information like the candidate's full name and address and the date, type of the election. It also has to include financial information about the contributions and expenditures the individual received. And then it has to include the signature of the person completing the report, which is your treasurer. Records of contributions include those records that your treasurer should be keeping, which include the contributor's name, street address, the date of the contribution, and the form and amount of the contribution. The form of a contribution means the way it was made, such as by a check or as an in-kind contribution like printing campaign signs. The amount of the contribution is the amount that's actually provided or the value of the in-kind contribution. Even in instances where itemized reporting may not be required, your treasurer needs to be keeping itemized records of contributions. In some cases, additional information may be requested after a filing is made, so you need those detailed records available. This is also true for local candidate filing waiver filers, because if there's a problem with your local candidate waiver, you may have to provide additional information later. Your treasurers also should be keeping itemized records of expenditures, including the name and address of the payee, the date, amount, and the purpose of the expenditure. For any expenditure in excess of $25, you have to include what's called a receipted bill with your filing. A receipted bill is either a copy of a canceled check, a copy of your bank statement showing the expenditure with additional information added to it if necessary, and a paid receipt, or a paid receipt from the vendor. A paid receipt means it's a receipt that's been marked paid by the vendor. The check or receipt demonstrates that the payment has been made. There are 4 election-based reports, which are the pre and post primary election report and the pre and post general election report. There are also 2 annual reports, which are the annual and semi-annual report. Not all of these filings will be required for you. The filings you have to make depend on when you file your declaration of candidacy, whether your name will be on the primary ballot, when you raised and spent campaign funds, and how much money you raised and spent, and whether you maintain your campaign committee in between election years. I'm not going to talk in this webinar about primary filings because very few school board candidates have primary elections. But if your name will appear on a primary election ballot, contact your local board of elections for guidance on whether and when you have to file pre and post primary reports. This is the cover sheet for all campaign finance filings. It's a Form 30A. This includes most of the information you have to file. These are the supporting forms that your treasurer may need to complete depending on how extensive your campaign is. All of these forms are readily available from the Ohio Secretary of State's website, which is this page here, www.ohiosos.gov. You'll click on the Campaign Finance tab, which is indicated by the red arrow. That'll take you to this page, and then you'll click on the tab that says Filing Forms. Here's the first page of the filing forms list. These are all of the forms. You probably won't need all of these forms. In fact, you definitely won't need all of these forms, but your treasurer can go through and select the forms that you do need. All of these statements have to be filed by the appropriate due date. Postmarking them is not sufficient. These are fillable forms. You can enter the information on them and then save them as PDFs on your computer, or you can print them out. You can also print out blank forms and complete them by hand. After they've been completed, your treasurer should print, sign, and mail or hand deliver the statement to the appropriate Board of Elections, which is where you filed your declaration of candidacy. You can also file statements electronically with the County Board of Elections. From the Campaign Finance page, click on the File Reports Online button. That'll take you to this page, and you'll go to the bottom where it says Local County Level Filing Information. There are user guides for various kinds of filings you might choose to make. Click on these for assistance on how to file. You can also click at the very bottom where it says County Directory to get contact information for your County Board of Elections if you have additional questions. Here is the first page of Form 31A, which lists your contributions. This is how you might, or your treasurer might, complete the first entry on this form. And this is an example of the first page of the supporting form that discloses expenditures. Remember, for expenditures of over $25, like this one, your campaign finance report has to be supported by a copy of a receipted bill. The semi-annual report, which might be the first report you have to file, is due on Monday, July 31st before 4 p.m. This is required if you filed your declaration of candidacy before June 30th and you've raised more than $10,000 before June 30th, 2023. It's not required if you haven't yet filed your declaration of candidacy before June 30th, or you have filed it but you haven't raised more than $10,000. If you filed before this report is due, the time covered by this report will be from your last filing through June 30th, 2023. If you've made no previous filings, this report will cover from the date you declared your candidacy through 4 p.m. on June 30th. The pre-general election report is the first report, most of you will probably need to file. That's due on Thursday, October 26, 2023, before 4 p.m. This is required if you have raised or spent more than $1,000 before 4 p.m. on October 18, 2023, which is 20 days before the general election. It's not required if you filed a local candidate finance report waiver and you complied with the requirements. It's also not required if you haven't filed a declaration of candidacy more than 20 days before the election. That's fairly unusual, but it can occur. The time period covered for this report is from the date of your last filing through October 18th, or if there's no previous filing, from the date you declared your candidacy through 4 p.m. on October 18th. Again, you're filing this statement at the Board of Elections in which you filed your declaration of candidacy. The post-general election report is due on Friday, December 15th, before 4 p.m. This is required if your name appeared on the ballot. Even candidates who filed a local candidate finance report waiver still have to file this form to terminate their campaign. They may not have to disclose anything, but they're filing what's called a short form report with the Board of Elections. Remember, no matter what your candidacy was, if you have a committee, you need to terminate your committee on Form 30 unless you want to continue it into next year. Continuing it into next year will mean that you'll need to file some statements next year, although you won't have to file the annual report, which is normally due in January, if you file this post-general election report. The time period covered for this report is from the pre-election report, if you were required to file that, which is probably ended at October 18th, through 4 p.m. on December 8th. If you weren't required to file the pre-general election report, the time covered is from the date you declared your candidacy through 4 p.m. on December 8th. The reason why I'm hitting all these deadlines so hard is because failing to file or not filing can result in penalties, which can include a fine, referral for prosecution, or removal from the ballot. Reports have to be filed on time. If they're not, or if you fail to file altogether, your committee will be automatically referred to the Ohio Elections Commission for investigation. If you file a form and discover that your report had an error in it, there's a period of time within which you can file a corrected report or an addendum. Contact the Board of Elections if you discover that there's an error in a report you've already filed. Remember not to mail the statement on the day that it's due. That will likely be considered a late filing. It's not enough for it to be postmarked on the due date. If you're filing electronically, pay attention to relevant deadlines for filings. Finally, here are some campaign finance resources. The Secretary of State's office has recently updated its campaign finance handbook, and that's available at the first link. There's also a 2023 candidate requirement guide, which includes a section that's specifically devoted to Board of Education candidates. The Secretary of State's office also has e-filing user guides. This is the one for campaign finance, but you can find the other ones at the same link we talked about earlier. Some additional resources for candidates include the Get On Board Ohio website, OSBA's candidate workshops. I hope to see you at one. And your county Board of Elections. This directory will take you to the contact information for that office. We hope you'll reach out to us while you're pursuing your campaign. We wish you the best of luck and get on board.